It's just that I did want to move on. The idea of just being in this internal kind of rock and roll, Jeff Beck-oriented sound band was okay, but I knew that we could do other things and explore other territories and areas of music and stuff. And they were fairly reticent about doing it. And I could see that if we were going to try and do that, it was going to be an uphill struggle, and I wasn't willing to go with it because I was too ambitious to do that. So it seemed an auspicious moment at the end of that show. I really should have told the band, but I never did. So they came off and said, "What are you talking about? It's our last show." I said, "Well, look, I'm sorry, Mick. Maybe I should have been a bit more diplomatic about it." I said, "But I think we've had it as a band. I think, you know that I want to go off and do it." I said, "Oh, you're going to do all that bloody arty stuff?" I said, "Probably, yeah." I said, "Right, I see. Well, I've got my own career." I think any television performance of that period, I was out of my gourd. I remember she was this long, tall bird with black hair. And she's overpowering. She's got very piercing eyes, and a rather doleful expression. But I remember that she warmed up when we sang together. Yeah. She seemed kind of a bit remote, and I'm not surprised that she was remote. I was probably like this crazed, like anorexic figure walking in. I'm sure she didn't know what to make of me. And at the end of the medley thing, I remember she sort of hugged me, and I thought, oh, she's quite human after all. Hopefully she was thinking the same about me. It was Carlos's riff, the Fame riff. We'd been using that riff for months on stage in a reworking of the Flares' Foot Stomping, and which indeed was with Luther. And Ava Cherry did a funny dance on the piano. I remember. A shimmy. She did a shimmy. Oh, that's right, because it started off as foot stomping and ended up as I wish I could shimmy like my sister Kate. That's right. And it was all that dang, 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 foot stomping.
Didn't that foot stomping riff turn into the basis for Fame, that duet with John Lennon?
When we were in the studio, when John came in and said, "Right, what are we going to do?" And I said, "Oh, God, we haven't got, what should we do?" I said, "Can't quit that riff that you did. Come, we've got him here, let's do something with it, So we got him there and we did the riff, and he started joining in, and it became Fame. The single Fame really exploded. And that was my least favourite track on the album, even though John had contributed to it and everything. And I had no idea, as with Let's Dance, that was what a commercial single is. And I haven't got a clue when it comes to singles. I just don't know. I don't know about them. I don't get it. And Fame was really out of left field for me. And I had no idea that combination of an English expression of soul would be quite so popular in the United States. Everything I wrote, I've never, to this day, been completely satisfied with anything I've written. I see great vast holes in it. It was like doing a painting, a non-objective painting. It was rather like sort of playing with the colours and the paint itself, and looking at it for a bit and then seeing what figurative image comes off it, and then trying to either hide that or amplify it or whatever. It's a nice way of working.
Brian Eno, he was very helpful in terms of opening me up as a writer and changing my ideas about how I can write songs.
There was absolutely no format. It wasn't at all formal. We came often with virtually nothing at all, and we would just take 5 or 6 notes or 2 or 3 chords and just repeat them in various sequences.
With Brian particularly, the whole idea of using a recording studio as an instrument, of not necessarily thinking you have to be prepared totally before you go in, that accidents will happen, and sometimes planned accidents work out really well. If there's a bad note, you can layer that note several times with other instruments, and suddenly that bad note sounds like an extraordinary piece of arrangement.
And so with the ongoing kind of music that I was doing at the time, Low, Heroes and Lodger, finally Scary Monsters, which by the time of Scary Monsters, the kind of music that I was doing was becoming very acceptable. Yeah. And I was not the only artist. Well, there was just a small group of us in '76 doing that kind of music. By the early '80s, it was definitely the sound of the early 80s. I think having had the gigantic success of Let's Dance, I suddenly felt, the first time in a long, long time, felt trapped. But also, I think I was fairly lured by the idea of that kind of international fame. And it seemed like, you know, I wasn't quite willing to break out of that trap myself quite so easily. I thought, well, I'll have another stab at this kind of thing because this is exhilarating. Looking back on it all tonight and Never Let Me Down, what I think I unfortunately did is pulverize some perfectly good songs. I think I should have sabotaged those songs. I dealt with them far too quickly and thinking in a far too linear fashion of making them work within radio format. And whenever I've done that, it's always been the utter catastrophe. And I probably should never have done that. Because some of the songs themselves I really like. But I always say, I thought, God, I wish I'd done that again. You know, it's not quite... Oh, well.
The show that I'm doing this year will be very, very theatrical compared to that last show. Much more like the shows that I used to do in the early 70s.
Despite the set being so big and the impressiveness, I thought, of the clutter of activity that was going on throughout, it should have worked in stadiums, but worked in arenas. And I think anybody who saw it indoors will testify to the fact that it was probably a really exciting show. But the pure size of it, I had thought, well, somehow you've got to be big in stadiums. But what I didn't take into account is because of the finite smallness of everything that was happening on stage, didn't go across in a stadium situation. That was a big mistake. I inherently like what we were doing. I just don't think it came off quite the way it should have done. On the guitar side of things, having now worked with Tin Machine for the last year and a half, I really quite like working with a small band again. Let's Dance was impressive, but it's not. It doesn't give me the same kind of satisfaction as, say, I Can't Read from the Tin Machine album, which for me is great. It's a great piece of work.
There's already a second Tin Machine album done, right?
Yes.
In Australia?
Yeah.
That was quick.
Yeah, well, we had the urge to go do, you know, and also I wanted to take them to a land they'd never been to before to see what it did to them. And,
what did it do to them?
Not very much.
We just don't want to do great.
Absolutely and unequivocally the last time.
Really?
Without doubt.
Oh, gee.
No, I won't ever touch them again.
Really? What are you going to do with them?
Well, I'll probably get clones in and they'll do them all over the world like Andrew Lloyd Webber does. I've noted that there's been a great emphasis on the older bands and older artists to go out with very large contingents. And so I thought, okay, just do the opposite. I want to keep the stage as minimalist as possible. I really wanted to have the feel of an opera or ballet stage, where it was just one large, dark space that could be lit in a theatrical fashion.
Have the arrangements changed? I mean, the sort of song's going to...
Stripped down, I think, is the real word. Stripped down so that it does become a keyboards, bass, drums, lead guitar interpretation of the songs that I've done over the years. It's a combination of film and video, so there's live events against footage, and they're completely spinning off each other. It's wonderful. It really is. I'm delighted with it. I've never been so